Bill and I stood there in shock for a few minutes as we took in the reality that things had apparently gone seriously sideways since we entered those damn pods. We looked out, and I began to step out of the blast doors as Bill shielded his eyes a little bit. Apparently, those type of glowing eyes he have are quite sensitive to the light. So he simply kept his hand up over his eyes to shield them from the direct gaze as we took a few steps out and looked around. The parking lot was, as I stated before, just overgrown. Vehicles that hadn't moved long enough that half of the tires seemed to be losing a little bit of air, and shrubs and everything covering the roads. The road itself was still noticeable, mostly still solid pavement, but the foliage on both sides had grown quite tall. We began to look around to each of the vehicles and realized things were beyond messed up. We spoke a little bit about it as we started to go from vehicle to vehicle looking for a way in. Thankfully, half the cars were actually unlocked, which surprised us, and we were able to find a few pieces here and there that we could use. Things like a lighter or some paper that we could burn. Every once in a while, we would find some old snacks that were still sealed, which immediately went down the hatch. Good Lord, we were hungry. It wasn't until we popped open the trunk of a few of these that we actually found survival kits in the back. I was well aware of these. Hell, I had one, but my vehicle was way off in the parking garage, and that was a couple miles out from here. Why they insisted on building the parking garage so far out, I still don't know. But it is what it is. We still found what we needed to survive, the two of us, for at least a few days. And a few days is what we needed before anyone started to wake up again. We went back inside, again watching out for potential trouble. I drew the sidearm as I waited and listened as we walked down. I motioned to Bill to stay as quiet as possible. "No problem, man, no problem," is all he said as he delicately stepped as much as he could. I worried if those slightly clawed toes he has were going to be a problem. However, I didn't worry about it too much. We ended up back in the wing with the pods we came from. And then I remembered to ask, "Hey, there's more rooms like this, right?" Suddenly, that red complexion he had went completely blank. And I swear, even as red as he was, I could see the blood rushing out of his skin. "I don't know. I think they said something like that." I just looked at him and calmly said, "Okay, well, one thing at a time, okay?" Yeah, sure, man, sure. We went down each of the pods and we started writing down when they would start popping open again and looking to see if they were mostly human inside. Thankfully, the majority of what we saw was human, at least humanoid. I mean, come on, look at me. I'm blue now. For crying out loud, I'm almost a powder blue. What the hell? Whatever. In case things went bad, I still kept the pistol out as we took down the dates. Surprisingly, everybody would have their pods pop open in 5 weeks. That's when the last one in that room would open. Then we went out and looked for the other rooms. It took a while, as we found out that the building was set up in a way to segregate the different wings, each one coalescing in a central building. However, we did find other rooms full of pods, one of which was completely empty. This surprised us very much, as the pods had not been ripped into. There was no sludge on the floor. It was just sitting there, as if it was waiting for the next group to just be led in. It was odd, but we didn't care. In each of the rooms, we marked down how many pods were open, how many pods were still in operation, and when those pods would open. This, again, came out to less than 6 weeks. We were surprised. Don't they stagger everybody when they put them in? I mean, wasn't the next group supposed to be in like a week behind us? I was like, yeah, man, isn't that the way it goes? Yeah, I thought that's the way it goes. Well, it kind of makes sense now that they're a week behind. But as we went through, we received more of a shock. These things in there, though they were covered in a similar texture looking, the color was different. It wasn't as pink and blue. It was a darker, almost purplish. It was strange. Mix purple and crimson and you'll get the rough idea. Yet we could still see the other fluid that would drain off that was usually there in the first place, which was the color of piss. This made it difficult to find out what was humanoid and what wasn't. However, there was some noticeable changes. Some of the creatures that were in there seemed to fill up the entire pod. Others seemed so small that they almost seemed like infants. Strange. But we took our notes and continued throughout the entire facility. As we entered the last room, we received a hell of a shock. We heard beeping. That telltale beep, 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 as a pod was about to be opened up. This was supposed to be a warning for any nurses that were on duty that somebody was going to be released. We ran up as soon as we realized which one it was. It was on the highest tier up to our left. We scrambled up the stairs as fast as we could, and we looked, and it looked human size at least. What is this thing? And then we could hear the release valve open and the fluid draining off. We didn't know what we were going to see when the pod opened. I stood there with the pistol in hand, my finger on the trigger. Even though it was pointed down and away, it only took a moment to raise my hand. And we watched as the last of the fluid drained away and what was inside began to move. 2 arms reached up to its face as it struggled to breathe. It started pulling the sludge away from its mouth, and then it began to thrash almost as it tried to get the sludge farther and farther away. The pod itself began to open slowly as it moved up. The mechanism dulled with time, but it still moved. We watched, hearing as the thing began to pull things off its face and began to sit up. Just as I did, it reached out with its hands and tried to brace itself on the side of the pod and flip its face down so it was able to get the sludge away from its face without breathing any of it in. Then it started to move out. One leg came out to the side towards me, and I began to flinch, stepping back, putting both hands on the pistol and beginning to raise it up towards the torso. Barrel still facing down, but I didn't know what I would be facing. And then we heard it. A voice. What the fuck? It seemed like a feminine voice, which kind of put us a little bit at ease, but at least this thing was talking, and what the heck was going on? It stepped out and then looked at us and then fell back. Ah, shit, what is it? What are you guys? With that spark, I raised the pistol and backed up. Bill backed up from the other side as we looked at us. What? And it freaked out. What the hell? What the fuck? Ah, what the fuck? This feminist voice started screaming as it tried to literally back up through the pod. I lowered the weapon down a little bit and raised my other hand to show that I wasn't a threat. Bill started saying, "Whoa, easy, dude, easy. We're not going to hurt you. We're not going to hurt you. We just need to. Are you okay? What the fuck? What are you? Is all we heard from that female voice. And finally, it began to come out of the pod. Are you? What are you? What are you? As it looked sideways back at both of us. And we both looked at each other, and Bill said, "Yeah, we'd like to know that too." You might want to get out of there, and we'll get you to the shower room at least. Bill reaching out and helping the creature out. I looked, and it was seriously humanoid, but again, like me and Bill, very thin. Couldn't figure out why. And we walked as we could hear the sludge start sliming off its back, off its hair. As it pushed it off its face and flung its hand to the side, a large pile of the sludge flew into the center of the room and landed with a splat. This kind of grossed us out, as it reminded me of what happened before, and then made us chuckle a little bit, as it did sound like a big old shit hitting the ground. We finally got this one walking down the hallway where we could finally see what the deal was. They were blue like me. The same hair and everything. What the hell is going on? Why? Why are we blue? Why? Just why? What is going on? We got them to the shower room, but unfortunately, again, the showers did not function. Neither did the sinks. We found what we could to help them clean off, and as they did, it revealed, yes, it was a blue creature like me, cat eyes like mine, and yet the white hair and everything did not disguise the fact that they weren't like me. This was a female, for sure. No questions there. She seemed a little put back that she was naked in front of us, and then asked where the lockers were. We led her over and stayed out as she asked us a whole bunch of questions about what was going on. We answered to the best of our abilities as we heard the locker open, and she shuttled her things around trying to find any type of clothing to put on. Finally, she found something that would actually fit around this new form she had. It was strange to look at her, to see this alien form, alien to us at least, just asking us a bunch of questions. She seemed more than a little mad, almost entitled in the way she spoke, saying how, they can't do this to me, do they know who I am? And of course I had to respond to her, I don't think they give a shit, because I don't think they're around anymore. That made her pause when she asked, what do you mean? We explained that we had opened the blast doors and that the outside of the facility looked like it hadn't seen human interaction in years. There was a long, long pause at this. She began to scream, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what happened? What? And she booked out towards us, grabbed me by the arm, said, show me. And we walked her to the blast doors, but as soon as she saw the outside had been overgrown, she lost it and dropped to her knees and began to cry. I asked, what, do you know something? Do you know what happened? She couldn't stop sobbing. Me and Bill just kind of looked at each other like, okay, I don't know what the hell's going on here. I'm not a counselor, and I don't think Bill knew what to do either. I finally asked her name. It's Samantha. All right, Samantha, will you mind getting on your feet? Because we still have other things to take care of. Like what? Like seeing who else is going to be popping out of one of these pods. Oh, okay. She finally got to her feet and began to take control of herself. We tried to talk to her as while we walked, but she was awfully silent. I guess she was still trying to comprehend what had happened. I tried to joke at her and told her at least you didn't have to fight the big guy. She said, what? Well, we'll show you. Oh man, you don't have to show her that. I don't know if she'll like it. She needs to know. We need to be truthful here. We can't trust each other. All right, man. We brought her over to that green squat thing that I had shoved the knife in its neck. Its body was still there. Still just lifeless against the floor. She looked just absolutely in fear and wouldn't even go near it, as it looked like it was something out of a video game, something that could probably rip her limb from limb without even trying. I said, yeah, probably could. We continued down to that last section of pods that she came out of, and we checked to see when the next ones were going to come out. To our extreme shock and dismay, it wasn't going to be for another day or so. So we knew we had time. It was decided from all three of us, after we grabbed what little bit of food we could find out of the packs, to go and search for more supplies outside. So we did. Heading outside was trying for all of us. All I could hope is that the blast doors stayed open. They weren't on an automatic timer, but considering how slowly they opened up, the mechanism might have seized for all we knew. And we began to look around. The cars had already been searched clean by us, so we had to move on. We went down the road a little bit, and we found a house that I had barely noticed as we drove by in the bus. It had a fairly long driveway, which is the only thing that really gave it away, and then we could see the outline in the forest. Going up to it, it was in extreme disrepair. The lawn had grown over. The fountain in front of it hadn't run in years, clearly, as foliage was growing inside and out of it. The road was still noticeable, but the exterior of the house had been severely damaged. It didn't look like any type of battle damage that I could tell. Not any tornado damage, but just simple weathering. Holes in the roof, a couple busted windows, that sort of thing. We went inside to see what we could find, and the first thing I heard from Samantha was, "Hello!" And immediately I grabbed her by the arm, turned her, put my finger in front of my lips. "Shh. We don't know who's here." At that point, Billy went, "Well, maybe we should just search the house. You want me to take the top and you guys can take here?" I just stopped and looked at him and said, "This isn't an episode of Scooby-Doo. We stick together." So we did. Looking through the house, we didn't find much. Definitely not much in the way of food, except for a few canned vegetables that hadn't been opened. We decided to save those for later. We moved up to the second floor. One of the bedrooms had its roof torn off and everything was waterlogged from the rain, so that was useless. Then we moved up and found the master bedroom, which hadn't been touched. Without skipping a beat, Samantha actually ran up and jumped on the bed and curled herself up, and then proceeded to cough as the high amount of dust went into her lungs. Me and Bill kind of laughed at that as we began to search the closet, me looking for anything for protection and him for some extra clothes that might fit. Then we were able to both hit pay dirt. There was an old hunting rifle along with ammunition next to it. I took that, slung it over my shoulder. Bill started pulling out clothing and started handing it to each of us, saying, "Hey, this might fit, try it on. This might fit, try it on." Even though we had to be kind of exposed to each other beforehand, it was still hesitant for us to strip off the clothing we had to see if anything actually fit. However, I will say this, since we weren't even too worried about being modest, we could at least enjoy the view. And we laughed a little bit about the idea as we did so. As we started going through things, Samantha actually turned, put her hand behind her head and said, "So, does this post-apocalyptic shirt make me look fat?" Both me and Bill kind of chuckled at that, and then we heard from outside. This put me on edge as I immediately switched up from the pistol to the long rifle with it in my hand. The 30-30 was ready to rock and roll as I had my thumb on the hammer and my finger on the trigger. Moving over towards the window, I looked out and looked back at them. I shook my head because I didn't see anything. "The fuck was that?" Bill asked. "I don't know," I told him. "You know as much as I do at this point." I began to look back and forth to see if there was any movement in the trees or on the ground, but nothing. Then we realized we hadn't even checked the whole house. I reminded them that we still have to check the basement. This made them both nervous, as we have no idea what we had just heard. But something was out there. That was no bird call. That was no scream from a bear or anything like that. That was monstrous, whatever it might have been. However, we still had to check the rest of the house. I led the way down the stairs. And then we started searching. To our extreme delight, the downstairs were just loaded with all sorts of food that hadn't been touched yet. All sorts of canned vegetables. We sort of celebrated until I motioned for them to be quiet. And they reminded that something was still out there. We moved about, and then I heard Samantha go, "Oh my God, what is this?" I moved over and I could see there was a vault-style door in front of it. I checked it out. There was no handles. This was a full-on blast door. This was somebody's personal bunker. I looked around, trying to see if there was any way in, any type of controls, but I couldn't find any. I'm not well versed in bunker building, so I wouldn't know exactly what to look for, except for maybe some sort of way for air to circulate. Looking around, we figured, you know what? This is a good enough place to hold up for right now. So we stayed there the rest of the day and the rest of the night. We tried to ration our food as much as possible. We knew others would be joining us. However, we still didn't know what was outside. Every few hours we would hear. This was enough to keep us quiet. Enough that when nighttime came, I made sure nobody lit any type of matches. No candles, no flashlights, no nothing. Just to be safe, we all slept in the bathroom that night. It wasn't comfortable, but at least it was safer. Safer. The next morning, we could see the light coming through the small window up high in the bathroom, and I led us back to the facility. I knew we would have company soon, and soon we would have to worry about taking care of others. Because as it is, you can survive on your own, but you only thrive as a group. Basic survival law, that is. However, when we entered the facility, we heard something horrifying. It was a cross between the cry of a cow and the scream of a caribou. Something was in the facility. Pulling up the rifle, I stayed in front of us, and then I looked over to Bill, who was actually shaking in fear. I pulled the pistol out of the holster and handed it to him. He said, I don't know how to use this. I said, it's the same thing as a camera, as I shoved it into his hand. Point and shoot. Only put your finger on the trigger when you're ready to shoot. Understood? Yeah. And then I saw him put his finger on the trigger. And I said, only when you're ready to fire. And I slowly reached my hand around and removed his finger out of the trigger guard. Samantha was concerned, but I just simply told her, stay behind us. She had a small knife that she had found, but nothing else for her protection. We moved slowly through the facility, reaching out as far as we could, safely that is. We checked the pod rooms. Nothing. We checked the main facility. Nothing. We went to the cafeteria, and I saw that some of the tables and chairs had been knocked around since I had been there. I looked at them, and I put my finger to my lips, motioning them to be quiet. Again, keeping the rifle up to my shoulder and my thumb on the hammer, I waited as I moved slowly forward, looking around. What could be in here? What's around here? What do you think it is? Was what I heard. I just motioned with using my eyes to tell them, be quiet. I moved over towards the kitchen. I thought I heard something. Something moving? I moved closer and closer. Something's moving around over there. We can hear it. Something is moving around inside the kitchen area. I move up towards the door with that little circular window, and I peek inside. I look back and forth. I don't see anything, but I can hear something moving. Something is in there. I slowly push the door open, moving the butt of the rifle in first, and then lowering the barrel down. Looking around, clearing the room. There's nothing. What's in here? I look, and it wasn't the freezer door, but the refrigerator door was open. Crash! We heard one of the holding areas come apart, as in somebody had just taken shelves and thrown them against a whole bunch of shelves. Everything had just fallen down. At that point, my pulse was racing so much, but I kept everyone behind me. I reached back with my spare hand and made sure they were still there. I could feel the side of Samantha, and I grabbed her just above the waist and pushed her directly behind me. Moving forward, we could hear something tearing apart boxes. We moved ever closer and closer. Then silence. I stopped dead in my tracks once things went perfectly silent, keeping my rifle trained on the door. I moved a little bit closer, turning myself slowly to one side so I could possibly see inside the refrigerator. What is it? With a burst of speed, something came flying out. It ran into me as a shot rang up into the air and then into the ceiling. Something had knocked me back all the way and then burst out to the side. It stopped and turned and looked at us, and all we could think is, what the hell is that thing? It looked at us and sneered. It was a friggin' 6-foot-tall minotaur. What the hell is this thing doing outside its pod? Nobody was supposed to come out. Was it already freed? Was it already in the facility? What the hell is going on? It snorted and screamed and lowered its head. It brought its arms out. I knew it was about to charge. I scrambled for the rifle that had been knocked out of my hand. I grabbed it as the thing started to move. Chambering another round, I fired, and it glanced off the side of its skull. It lost its bearing and fell over me and slammed into the other side. I got up screaming, what the hell, what the hell, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck, get out of here, run, 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 run. As Bill and Samantha bolted out of the room, then I heard a boom from the freezer. What the hell was that? Looking at the small glass window that was on the edge of the freezer, that damn Lamia was up. It was awake. It was alive. How the hell was that thing alive? How could it possibly be alive? But this was the few seconds that Minotaur had got up and run at me again, this time slapping me aside with one of its arms. I went flying away and hit right into the freezer. The weapon again flew out of my hand as I didn't have a good grip on it. And it looked at me, and I swear it started to laugh. It raised itself up tall and wide, getting ready to hit me. And I could hear a thump, 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 like something was hitting the door behind me. I realized I was against the freezer door, but the freezer door was locked. I had locked it when I had left before. Reaching up, I pulled the pin out and yanked the handle just as the Minotaur started to move, and the Lamia burst out from inside, grabbed the Minotaur, and then wrapped its tail around it, began to squeeze. The Lamia tried to get behind its back, but the Minotaur began to grab it and pull. It pulled so hard the human part of it screamed in pain as it seemed like it was going to break its arm. I ran up and swung, catching the side of it with my hand, and I swear I broke most of the bones in my hand as I winced in pain. The thing looked at me and seemed to laugh at me at the idea that I had not even hurt it. The lamia continued to squeeze, yet it was being pulled away and peeled off by the Minotaur. I looked over. There was the rifle. I dove for it, grabbed it. The scope had been busted, so I didn't use it. Cocked the hammer back, looked down the iron sights, and the Minotaur looked up at me and then pulled the lamia in front so I couldn't get a clear shot. Fuck! I dropped the barrel of the weapon down and fired, catching it right in the knee. The thing dropped down as soon as the bullet ripped its knee joint apart and screamed into the air. I cocked as fast as I could, rechambering another round. The lamia pulled away just as I fired again, and the brains of the Minotaur went splat against the back door. It slowly dropped to the floor. And this time, I wasn't taking any chances. I rechambered another bullet, put it against his head, and fired, making sure that its brains were completely removed from its head. I looked up to the lamia, and I all of a sudden had a ping of fear. This thing had just taken on a Minotaur one-on-one without hesitation, and I think I just used the last bullet. I backed away as fast as I could, cocking the lever of the weapon, trying to make sure I had possibly something. Maybe it would scare her away. She backed away, her hands up, and then dropped one of them as it was still in pain from the Minotaur almost breaking it. I looked at her and said, "Can you talk? Can you speak?" She looked over after she shook her arm a little bit to make sure it was still functional. I can talk. She spoke in almost a baby voice. I said, "What the fuck?" It's all I could think. I looked at her and I said, "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm okay. Where's Mommy? Mommy was supposed to be here when I came out." I looked at the lamia. I was amazed. Her body it's the first time I really got a really close-up look to it. Yeah, it was clearly female. It looked like it was mid-teens, but the mind was that of a child. I said, "I don't know where your mommy is." And she began to cry. I said, Are you all right?" "I want my mommy." At that point, I could hear Bill down the hall, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I yelled back, "Yeah, but I need you both back in here." The lamia was still there as she began to sulk down into her own coils. "Why is this me? Why do I look like this? Where's my mommy?" As she began to sob uncontrollably. Me not ever having any kids, I didn't exactly know what to do. Thankfully, Samantha, after she got in and realized the situation, went in and held on to the young girl. We then tried to comfort her as best we could and explain the situation. Her young mind could barely wrap around it. I felt bad for her, I really did. A kid doesn't deserve this. Hell, none of us deserve it in the first place. But we waited in there until she calmed down, and then we found out what she had done. It was pretty much what I expected. She had got out and slimed her way, or I should say slithered her way around. She eventually found her way into the kitchen, but her young mind didn't understand that the food she was eating was rotten. Her body could somehow still digest it, which was a surprise to all of us. However, eating a large meal like that would cause any snake to go into a type of food coma. And that's when I found her. However, she woke up extremely thirsty and seeing all the fighting. She tried to get out. Apparently, she had tried to signal the Minotaur, and it just sneered at her. The fact that she realized that it was going to leave her to die is what pissed her off and made her attack it. Now, there are 4 of us, and we continue our way around the facility. Eventually, the girls head back, and they go to the house and try to prepare it for us, as me and Bill stay inside. However, Later that night, we realized we needed some sort of food, as the next day, a bunch of pods were due to open. However, we wouldn't know exactly when that was going to happen, as the Minotaur seemed to almost burst out of its pod. So we grabbed the orc. I cut off one of its arms, one of its legs, skinned it out, and brought it back. Our wonderful little Lamia did not know where the meat came from, but she really didn't care. Samantha, on the other hand, was a little perturbed at the fact that we had just brought back so much meat. I told her not to worry about it too much, but of course she did. The Lamia surprised us. We found out that the Lamia's name was Jasmine. Well, Jasmine surprised us all when we handed her the cooked meat after we built a fire and everything. She didn't chew it. Instead, her face opened, her jaw unclenched, and she actually absorbed the entire thing. It went down into her gut, and her gut expanded. It almost looked like she was pregnant. She looked down at it afterwards and giggled. Haha, Mommy would be happy I'm having a baby too. We all looked at each other on that one, and again felt sorry for her. We had no idea where her mother was, or her father, or anyone for that matter. All we knew is what was going to happen. The next day, we went back to the facility, but this time the pods that were due to opened exactly when they were supposed to. Thankfully, we were each able to be there for each of the openings. Not that both of us could be there at the same time. To our absolute shock and dismay, not a single one seemed to look human with the exception of one. And human is being a slight exaggeration. When the pod opened, I was more than ready to blow this thing's head clean off, as it seemed to have dimensions that were a little big for human. Well, she was big, but not in the way you would think. She seemed to have a bit more girth on her. Yes, this one was female as well. When she wiped the goop away from her face and back, towards the back of her head, I realized that she had the elvish type ears that I have as well. Only she had a completely pale complexion, completely Caucasian. And then as she wiped herself off as we walked, she started cursing at the fact that she had only gone in there for a simple breast augmentation, and now the damn things were about as big as my torso. I had tried my best not to laugh at this. I was just thankful she wasn't bashful, or else this would have been a very, very difficult walk. As our numbers increased, it was very obvious that we were not fully human anymore. The only one we found that even resembled fully human was one Asian female who did not look Asian, at least not physically. She was almost 6.5 feet tall and, shall we say, adequate proportions. This again kind of pissed everyone off, as they're like, how come I couldn't have just had some adaptations as simple as that? Although she did say how her back was going to end up hurting. You have to laugh in these situations. However, every time a bunch of us laughed, we would hear another strange sound from the woods. Something far off. Something inhuman. When we got approximately 10 personnel, the majority of females would stay around the buildings and around the house to make sure that everything was secured. I gave them a quick 1, 2, 3 lesson on weapons, as we had found a few more, and told them to make sure that they only use them if they have to. Our bullets are not to be wasted. Moving down the road, we realized there was a separate paved road that none of us had noticed the first time through. Following, we thought we would find another of these large houses. To our surprise, it was another large office-looking building. When we were about to go inside, we heard a strange roar off in the distance. All of us looked around, but we couldn't see anything. What the hell was out there? We motioned that we had to get inside. The electric locks had long since malfunctioned, and it was easy to get through. The security doors weren't much of a problem. Another one suggested that we split up to cover more ground, and that's when two guys decided to smack him to remind him that we don't split up. This ain't a horror movie. This is just horror. As we began to move around the facility, we found little in supplies. However, we did find files. Files upon files upon files. Most of which were simply word about how augmentations were going to go, which diseases were being cured, that sort of thing. We would have to come back later to analyze them, to find out what had happened. However, it wasn't until somebody actually went into the garbage at the reception desk that we realized we might have figured it out. The scream of, "What the fuck?" came out, and we all hurried over to see what it was. It was a simple old-fashioned newspaper. I thought those went out of style long before this ever happened. But on there, it simply had the title, "Monsters Roam the Earth." We all looked at each other. They couldn't be talking about us, could they? Maybe. And then we heard something skittering around. Something was in here with us. Something we didn't know what it was. It moved again. Something was around. Those of us with weapons drew them and got them ready. We could hear it moving about. Still, something was either above us or in the walls. Something, it wasn't where we could see it. Alright. Let's keep going. Whatever it is, we'll eventually find it. We moved through the security doors and checked the second floor. However, there wasn't much there. At all. Old office equipment. Some old lab coats. That was all. One of the guys I thought had watched too many video games grabbed the IDs. I asked him why the hell he did that. He goes, "Security doors need a badge." I looked and rolled my eyes. It wasn't until we got down to the lowest level that we realized, hey, he might be right. We walked into the first basement level, and we found another one of the blast doors. But this blast door was massive.